Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned because it's Wednesday. That means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Steve Donoghue over on his channel will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week is pretty special because we're talking about a comic strip character, an adventure comic strip character, which has lasted since 1937 until now. This is told one continuous story from 1937 and is still going on today. But we're going to be focusing on the portion of this saga that was written by its originator, Hal Foster. And of course, I'm talking about Prince Valiant. Prince Valiant. This is an epic piece of work, Prince Valiant. And it's not something many comic book readers read too much anymore. First of all, it didn't originally appear in comic books. This was a newspaper strip. It was a Sunday strip. So every Sunday, back in the olden days when this came out, and for many years afterwards, it would come out in a full page, a Sunday full page, which must have been glorious. It arrived on the scene in 1937, and Hal Foster, who drew it, had previously done the Tarzan strip, and he wanted to move on to something of his own creation. And so he created Prince Valiant. And he wrote and drew Prince Valiant, and he continued doing that for years and years. He did get, by the end of his run, he was getting help on the art. But he kept on it until, I think, 1971, I think. So basically, when I came on the scene, Prince Valiant was no longer being done by Hal Foster. But that's a long time to be doing this comic strip. And this is an enormously influential piece of work. This comic strip has influenced so many great comic book artists. Jack Kirby, for one. You don't see much of Jack Kirby in these pages. Those two artists are very, very different, and I'll show you why once we get to it. But Jack Kirby was heavily influenced by Hal Foster's Prince Valiant, and so was John Buscema, the great comic book artist John Buscema. And you do see a lot of Hal Foster, I think, in John Buscema's work. If you read his classic Conan the Barbarian comics, very often you would see a lot of Hal Foster in there. Even though the characters, as adventure characters, are a little different. Conan the Barbarian and Prince Valiant. But let's talk about this series a bit. So it showed up in 1937. And I will show you the very first newspaper strip. This is the very first Prince Valiant newspaper strip. And it's a little different than the Prince Valiant newspaper strips that come afterwards in that it has a lot of little panels because he was telling a lot of story, Hal Foster was. One thing that became a regular thing and has never changed in Prince Valiant is that there are no thought balloons, there are no word balloons. It's all just text with pictures, giving it the feel of an illustrated novel, for example, which it kind of felt like. And the artwork is just magnificent. Doesn't show so much in these first few strips. And this is the very beginning of Prince Valiant's saga, where his father, the King of Thule, has lost a battle. And he is chased by his enemies until he is, well, as it says here in the beginning of the second strip, fleeing from his victorious enemies, the King of Thule, which is Norwegian, I think. Thule is in Norway, is wrecked on the English coast. The savage Britons oppose his landing. So the savage Britons are after the King of Thule. And we see Prince Valiant show up in the comic here as a very young Prince Valiant. He starts off the series as a little kid. Doesn't stay a little kid very long, but he starts off as a little kid. And I didn't bring out the whole thing, because I think these run like 27 volumes or something. I don't have the last couple of them. I brought out the first 5 of them because there's something that happens in the 5th volume, and in my opinion, that kind of is a cutoff. That kind of is the end of like the first saga, I think, or the first section of Prince Valiant's life, because something very important happens in volume 5, and he's kind of an official grown-up after that, and I'll show you that. But Prince Valiant, so it's the strip showed up, and when it first showed up, you have Prince Valiant, and the strips have these very little panels. But eventually things change. Hal Foster has a lot of room in these, and so he uses that to great effect. I mean, look at that scene right there. So this is all one newspaper strip, and he starts taking up more space with larger illustrations, these large, glorious illustrations in the strip. And basically what's happening in this story is that Prince Valiant, the son of the King of Thule, they're in Britain now, and this is the time of King Arthur. So the story actually takes place in the late Roman Empire. But when you look at it, it looks like it's the Middle Ages. And Hal Foster, he takes many historical liberties with the costumes and what's going on and the different peoples that he has show up in this comic. And it's just magnificent. And the artwork is just beyond compare. It's just enormously detailed. And one of the differences with this strip, like a strip like Prince Valiant, is it's very realistic. It's a very realistic style, realistic illustrated style, enormously detailed. He could get away with this, which you can't really get away with in a monthly comic book, because he had a whole week to do one strip, where comic book artists like Jack Kirby certainly didn't have that kind of time when they were doing a page. Also, when you look at the panel layout, you'll notice that the figures tend to be at a bit of a distance very often. He does have close-ups and close-up shots and portraits of the main characters, but very often the action is a few steps away. And the time in between panels tends to be longer than in your typical comic book. In your typical Jack Kirby comic book, in Thor, for example, you could have panels that happen, there are seconds in between these panels. Where in Prince Valiant, you could have like days or weeks in between panels, depending on what's going on. But just look at this. This is still early Prince Valiant, but just look at the enormous detail here. Look at the stonework on the bridge. I mean, just look at that. That is amazing. Just an amazing amount of detail. And it just continues that way all throughout these early volumes. And the volumes I grabbed, these are all 1940s volumes. And one thing you'll get a lot is Prince Valiant, he very frequently takes his clothes off and is either naked or half naked. I always found that peculiar when I was younger. But that's something that happens a lot. And again, just look at that. Look at that shot. That's just part of a strip. That's just part of the Sunday strip in between these other smaller panels. Just amazing and glorious. It's just incredible. Now, King Arthur is in this strip. Prince Valiant goes to Camelot, becomes becomes a figure in Camelot, eventually becomes a knight. Very heroic character, Prince Valiant, still very young here in these early stories. Each volume has a couple years. This is volume 3. And I should say something about the books themselves, because I don't think I have yet. These are all done by Fantagraphic Books. Yeah, Fantagraphic Books. And they're just incredible volumes. They are oversized volumes if you look at them compared to a lot of graphic novels, because this was a strip that was published in a whole page. And so these aren't as large as they originally appeared, but they're still of a very generous size. And they can get away with that because the books are not thick. Like I said, they have a couple years in each volume, which is why there are so many volumes. And so they're very easy to handle. They're very light and easy to handle. And the artwork is just reproduced so beautifully. I mean, just look at that. Look at how much detail and work he put into this every week. I mean, it's just astonishing, really. And the story itself is a really exciting, really captivating story. And like I said, it's been going on continuously. There is a Prince Valiant strip going on nowadays. At this point, Prince Valiant, I think, is a grandfather. He's an older Prince Valiant now. So, it's a different kind of thing, but it's still Prince Valiant, and it's kind of amazing. It's still going on. They only put him in the newspapers that Prince Valiant is in. I think he's just in a quarter of the page or something. No longer does Prince Valiant have a full page, as he did back in the glory days. Back in these days, when Prince Valiant was going on, newspaper strips and comics that were in the newspapers got a lot more respect than comic books did. Everybody read these. Not everybody read comic books. The audience for Prince Valiant back in the 40s was pretty huge, though. Everybody, like I said, was reading the paper. And so everybody was reading the Sunday papers. And so everybody was reading the continuous adventures of Prince Valiant. Because, he went to Camelot, and then he just went out and had a bunch of adventures, one after another after another. And it was just all amazing stuff. There was a couple things. Oh, yeah. This is one of the craziest pictures you'll see in Prince Valiant when Prince Valiant is being tortured. Poor fella. Yes, Prince Valiant, half naked again, and this time being tortured. Poor fella, hung up by his fingers. Stuff like that happens. And it's just incredible stuff. Glorious stuff. So I said something happened in volume 5, I think. Where's volume 5? Here's volume 5. Here it is. No, that's the first one. I have it down here somewhere. This is volume 5. Okay. Something happened in volume 5, which was pretty important. And that is Prince Valiant met his future wife. And he actually, there she is there. And I want to say her name is Aaliyah. Is it Aaliyah? I hope I'm not getting that wrong. It's been a while since I've read this. Is there some place where they'll tell me what her name is? Well, I think it's Aaliyah. And I did mark off this very important section with Prince Valiant because this is where he actually does get married. Prince Valiant gets married, and there's a little box at the bottom that says, "Now here, according to approved writers of romance, the saga of Prince Valiant should end. But the winning of Alita is one thing, costing Val no more than his heart. But living with her is another story, and we think the story worth telling." And so right here, Prince Valiant is officially a grown-up. From this point on, he's a married man. But the story just keeps going on. It's an incredible epic that has just gone on and on and on. And certainly it's an enormous accomplishment for Hal Foster to have produced this. And it's no wonder that it has been so incredibly influential. It's great stuff. Each one of these volumes costs about 30 bucks or 20 or 30 bucks. This one is 20. No, wait. Yeah, this one's 20. But they run around 20 or 30 bucks depending on where you get them. And there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. This, like I said, I couldn't bring them all in here, so I just brought this little stack. But it's an incredible achievement and a really good read. And in fact, dragging them out for this video, I've been intending to do this just because for me, as far as, you know, comic art is concerned, this is just the high point. This is what all other great comic book art must be judged against. It's just a masterpiece of comic book art or comic art. And so, yeah, it's about time I revisit these. So I'm going to start reading these again at some point in the near future. Although my time is pretty filled up with Thor right now. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, that was Prince Valiant. I'll shut up. I will catch you next time.